welcome to today's intro session on the Immunoengineering Postdoctoral Training Program. So I'm Sean Yu. I manage the Center for Immunoengineering here at PME. So this postdoc program is the result of an award from the NIAID that funds a set number of fellowships every year that provide up to 2 years of funding support for postdocs on campus. The main goals, as you're going to find out, is just basically to boost your profile and your experience of a lot of the things that today's PIs do. So in a way, it can certainly be seen as a way to help prepare you better for an academic career. So with that, to get started, if you're not familiar with the Immunoengineering Center and what we do, we are a part of PME. And the main idea is that if we looked back to some of the ideas of that led to today's MRI, right, like a technology that we see in a lot of hospitals, this is a product of a lot of research that spanned decades. So it also resulted in 3 Nobel Prizes. The first one in physics in 1952 was given for the whole discovery of the phenomenon of making measurements of magnetic resonance. And then that was turned into a technology later on by some scientists in Switzerland, which resulted in the 1991 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, and that led to NMR, which is just used to make, for the non-chemist, really precise measurements on the composition of materials, right? And finally, it took another group of people to put 2 and 2 together and basically come up with the innovation that if you apply that to the body, then you could get these really wonderful images that are very detailed and unprecedented. So that led to another Nobel Prize in physiology and medicine. So in idea, what we do here, we like to build on the strengths of immunology here at UChicago. We have a really strong immunology department in BSD, strong partnerships with the professors there, a lot of collaborative work across their department and here in the School of Engineering. And we think that our 2 approaches, from immunology, just taking the basic science approach of trying to understand the components that lead to immune response and how that is either functional or dysfunctional in diseases or in certain treatments, and how to combine that with engineering, which is kind of creating new tools and trying to understand things from a larger scale. And we think that by merging 2 and 2 together, you can come up with these innovations, these new therapies and diagnostics. And so generally the projects that would be within scope for this training program would be people working at this sort of interface, or even people who are kind of working on just like one of the aspects. And just by hopefully bringing all the postdocs together, we could kind of have a lot of exchanges of ideas or be able to build off one another's strengths, which is kind of like what you're going to be doing eventually when you become an independent investigator anyway. So with that, like I said, the whole training program itself, it's a 2-year fellowship program, and it's basically operates like a fellowship. So instead of applying with a proposal for your project to the NIH, instead it's being reviewed internally here by a group of faculty that are affiliated with the administration of this program. And once selected, the postdocs who become fellows, and they are essentially funded entirely by NIH money. And then it's kind of like this nice fellowship you could also put on your CV. And the idea is that you're kind of pursuing training under the supervision of not only your primary mentor, but also some of the collaborators. This is kind of like a way to formalize that collaboration between your lab and theirs. Our objectives, again, outside of the research, is just kind of enabling the bioengineers, immunologists, clinicians, everyone to speak each other's language. So a lot of that is kind of by promoting your ability to go out and pursue avenues of research and training that maybe you would normally not have been able to if you were completely funded by your PI. Basically, you're going to see later on that part of the funding from this fellowship program allows you to travel to 1 conference a year, plus other training objectives that basically, if you're an engineer, for example, you go take some immunology classes, or vice versa. If you're coming in from an immunology background, you can go take some classes outside in computational and quantitative approaches. And internally, we also run these grant writing workshops, other additional workshops that will allow you to be able to think like the funder, basically prepare better proposals. And also you have the option to kind of pursue additional professional development training around UChicago and beyond. The application process, mainly, this is kind of the slide that's kind of critical here. The eligibility for a program, this is just because it's an NIH funded program through the National Research Service Awards schema, NRSAs for short. They require that people who are funded through this are US citizens or permanent residents only by the time that you begin their appointment. So for example, if you're currently not citizen or not a green card holder, you could go ahead and apply, and then basically by August 1, which is when the appointments start, you want to ideally have that in hand, because that's basically how the NIH could approve that the money could come here to pay for your fellowship spot. Of course, you need to hold a doctoral degree from a accredited educational institution, which is usually most of our postdocs here anyway. And then you must not have had more than 36 months of prior postdoctoral NRSA support. And this is critical. Some people, maybe when you were a PhD student, if you hold a F31 fellowship, or if you were part of a training grant at that time, and then once you, basically that's allowable so long as you've graduated, and once you start your PhD and this is your first postdoc, that whole clock resets, and then you kind of start off with 0 months of prior NRSA support. And of course, we highly encourage women and underrepresented minorities and as economically disadvantaged applicants to apply. The components of an application are 4 parts, all of which are used for the evaluation process. Of course, we would like to see an NIH-style biosketch and your proposed research and training. This is usually a 2-pager, just kind of describing what your research project is, your career goals, and how some of the things I'll mention later today, like the objectives and the offerings of this program, align with your research and career goals. You also want a joint letter of support, or if more applicable to your case, we will accept multiple letters of support in your favor. That's basically kind of like, think of it as a kind of like your thesis committee, and we're looking for about 3 to 5 members that are composed of a mix of scientists and engineers. So appropriate people would be, for example, of course, your PI, and then if your PI is like an engineer, you want to look for some collaborator in the community of immunology or somewhere in BSD would be appropriate as a basic scientist, and then you could kind of have a third, another few more members that are from either of these backgrounds. Also, NIH right now is kind of trying to stress a lot more this whole idea of rigor and reproducibility, and a lot of that has to do with trying to understand and really dive into the history of models and approaches in your field. So in order to fulfill that, we now ask that there's a proposed review article topic that you'd possibly work on sometime in your postdoc. It doesn't have to be something that you have to complete within the next 2 years if you're funded. But anyway, just something that you think that you'd be prepared to write when you finish the training. Alternatively, of course, if you're like a 2nd or 3rd year postdoc and you've already worked with your mentor to submit a review article in the past, you could always just include that review article and we accept that as fulfillment of this objective. The timeline looks like this. Of course, when you're first starting off, you're formulating your research project and identifying your collaborators, and then you're preparing application materials, which are due at the early, I think the 1st week next month. And then we basically go and evaluate those applications. It'll take us about a month, and then basically verify some of the things with NIH. And finally, whenever we mail your decisions in May 1, and then we'll work with your home departments, HR, to prepare your appointments, which will start August 1. There's some flexibility in the start date. Let's say if you know that your PI is running out of funding for your position by July or something, we can work with you to try and make sure that you're able to work uninterrupted with your research. Okay, so the parts of the training program you can be aware of, like it's not all just lab work. So we have a number of things that, like I said, are meant to help build your perhaps your network and also your competitiveness for those academic careers. So the main things that we're looking for outside of that, there are some small things like publications and patents. We want to know about like what you're doing on your research side, but as well as kind of seeing how you're making progress towards your own personal development plan. And there's going to be annual surveys that are required in order to continue your appointment towards the second year and beyond. With regards to the actual activities, these all are somewhat aligned with the NIH's desires. They want to be able to see more postdoctoral fellows right now, particularly outside of the lab, right? I kind of mentioned the whole immunology and bioengineering focus, but you want to be able to show that you're able to communicate your results effectively, also be able to communicate with a general public effectively, and also other professional development things. So example activities that you might be able to do outside of your lab research. With regard to training, again, I mentioned the conferences and the short courses outside of UChicago before. But but outside of that, you could also foresee perhaps going to a conference every year where we do conduct an annual research day, and we do require fellows to try and present a seminar, 30-minute seminar in our Science Hour series, which occurs once every other week. Outside of that, you're also going to see these science communications workshops, which is aligned with PME's main science communications program for grad students. In this program, you kind of learn about how to communicate science to a younger audience or a non-traditional student audience. And then the goals there is that hopefully within this is only required within your first year of funding. And by the end of the first year, you've kind of participated in leading a what's called a Junior Science Cafe, which is when it's a partnership with the Museum of Science and Industry here in the South Side. You kind of talk about your research or something related to it to a group of middle school students. And there's also a City Colleges program where we have a group of, I guess they're community college students around the Chicago area, and they're looking to transition from their 2-year program to a 4-year STEM program. And the idea is that you kind of give them a little background about what research and background in immunology and bioengineering can be. And then this is a tag taught course that lasts about a week with them. And you're going to be basically sharing that responsibility with the other postdocs who are funded. So it's not like you're going to have to prepare the whole week worth of material for this course. Finally, there's additional professional development activities, again, aligned with the whole rigor and reproducibility aspects, the ability to think about I guess how to handle things like mentorship or potential conflicts of interest, or in the future, let's say your 2 grad students decide to get into a little battle about first authorship, right? So we have aspects of that are built into the training that are that you can participate in. I think the responsible conduct of research, there's a minimum amount that the NIH needs to see in order to be able to continue your funding. I know we do provide that granted proposal writing workshop, which is a monthly workshop that you meet together with the other postdocs and then the 2 PIs of this grant, Professors Melody Swartz and Marissa Allegre. And then we kind of talk about proposals, including K99 fellowships and R21s and R1s. And we'll go over examples of real grant applications that have been submitted in the past. And of course, once you start getting to the later stage and you're trying to apply for jobs, we will arrange mock interviews and chalk talks for you with the other faculty members. Okay, so to get into more details, like all these slides again will be provided online later on, but then just so you know about the NIH specific requirements, the minimum things that they would want to see in order to continue your funding. There are these, there's this annual course offered by the Institute of Translational Medicine, which includes researchers from UChicago, Northwestern, Rush, I think UIC, and there's I think the North Shore University Health System. So you basically get together with clinicians and postdocs in this environment, and it's like a weekly course that occurs around July to August. It covers everything from experimental design, conflicts of interest, like I said, biological variables. And these are things that you probably would have to write about whenever you apply for funding in the future anyway. And finally, I think I did mention briefly the grant proposal writing workshop. I got to update this, but then since this year was our first year of this program, we did have a system where we tried to work based off of another training grant here at UChicago, and then we built our syllabus off of that essentially, and then now we've kind of got it running for about a year. So next year it's going to be a lot more of going into your own proposals and working with the postdocs who are entering the second year of funding. There's I mentioned mock academic interviews, and of course outside of these more mandatory things that I've mentioned in the last few slides, you could of course have the option of participating in some of these other things around UChicago, and we will fund your tuition or your fees for participating in some of these things if that's what you're interested in. Rachel, I know you're part of this photo. I got it from PME. So, so this is the Science Communications program I mentioned earlier. It's just being led and being run in combination with a general PME-wide initiative for grad students who are interested in science communications. And again, the capstone deliverables of that. This is a monthly workshop, and then there's 2 months where you're kind of actually delivering a presentation in front of K-12 children or these community college students from around the city. I'm required to mention this part because this is NIH policy regarding the T32 awards. Just because this is a congressionally mandated program that's meant to boost the workforce in STEM for the country, there's a general expectation that as part of receiving funding and support from the NRSA, that you're able to also give back to the country. And so what that means is that if you receive the first 12 months of postdoctoral support through the program, you're expected to work another at least 12 months in a STEM related field. Since this is a 2-year program, completion of the full 2-year length of the program is basically all you need to do to be able to discharge that obligation. Outside of that, if let's say you were to work 12 months in this position under NRSA support, you could also transition. Let's say you get a job offer and you work in a STEM related field outside UChicago. That also works as a way to discharge this payback obligation. So you just need to expect, if you're selected, you're going to be expected to sign this form that's going to be submitted to the NIH. Of course, like if you publish or release any sort of data related to your research fall under NRSA support, we hope that you give us credit for supporting you. This allows us to continue getting this sort of funding and prolonging this the validity of this program to enable us to support more postdocs in the future. Finally, any questions so far? And if not, I'm not seeing anything in the chat either. I'll move on to the technical details. So again, since this is a postdoctoral fellowship, the one critical thing you need to be aware of is that this is different from a postdoctoral scholar appointment. So essentially, the fine detail is that postdoctoral scholars are employed by UChicago. The money directly comes from some other grants or sources that are specific to the UChicago system. On the other hand, postdoctoral fellows essentially become NIH employees that they're just kind of here in the meantime. And so while salary levels generally are defined by NRSA guidelines, even for the scholars, the main difference stems from this fine detail. And because postdoctoral fellows under T32 support are not UChicago employees, you become ineligible for benefits. But in essence, what we do is we work with your PI to boost your stipend to allow you to buy back those benefits, which are provided by the same organization that provides the benefits right now for you if you're a postdoctoral scholar. So essentially, the idea is that if you're currently a postdoc here and when we fund you next year, well, we'll just work with HR and everybody else and your PI to make sure that we're able to provide you the same level of coverage as if you were still a postdoc scholar employed at UChicago. The main difference as far as at the end of the day, the amount of money comes from the health insurance, because some postdocs we understand might have families, and insurance tends to be more expensive for families or those with partners. So the part that your PI usually has to cover is not much compared to the salary they probably have to cover for you right now. So usually PIs have been pretty happy to just take over this part and to boost up your stipend in order to cover all of these. So anyway, just keep note that if you're appointed to the fellowship, that it's going to look like this if your salary increases, but actually at the end of the day, you're probably about the same off as a scholar. And so the main benefits are just being able to add an additional fellowship to your CV, and it makes you look a little bit better when you go up for those faculty applications later on. Again, we'll work. I'll basically work with HR and your supervisor to do the paperwork and all of that, but just expect that I will end up corresponding a lot with the postdocs during this process. So basically get forms like the Payback form to the NIH, and then some other appointment forms that the NIH needs in order to get approval for your funding. And then reappointment. So this is you entering your second year of support. We'll probably send you the individual development plan and a performance evaluation that you'll complete with your mentor. That's kind of really similar to what the rest of the university staff kind of go through every year, except that it's specific for, of course, like researchers. So once we complete that, we'll process your reappointment, and then we'll try to make this as seamless as possible for you. So so you can just focus on your research basically. Anyway, to conclude, these are the contacts. Again, I'm Sean Yu, so you can feel free to email me if you have any questions regarding like the overall program itself. The program directors, Professor Swartz and Marissa Allegre, again, represent this whole immuno and engineering mix that we like to provide as part of the program. And finally, regarding the scientific communications and outreach, the Museum of Science and Industry and the City Colleges partnerships, Laura Rico Beck, who's the Assistant Dean for Education and Outreach here at PME, is the leader of that program and the training. Thank you for your attention, and look forward to hearing your questions and seeing your applications.